All right, let's jump right in. Have you ever thought about how a single short sentence could attempt to define something as massive as the nature of God? Well, today we're going to unpack one of the most famous attempts ever, a masterpiece of theological logic from way back in the 17th century. On the surface, it just looks like a list, but trust me, there's a deep, powerful structure hidden inside. And along the way, we'll look at some of these key terms in Chinese to see how these huge ideas translate. Let's get into it. So this is it. This one sentence from the Westminster Shorter Catechism. It's packed, right? 10 different attributes all rolled into one statement. And you might be tempted to just see it as a laundry list of divine qualities. But that's not what's going on here at all. There is a brilliant internal logic at play, and we're going to take it apart piece by piece. And the way this definition is built is it's really elegant. See, before it tells us what God is, it first tells us how God is. It kicks things off with these three foundational qualities that basically act as a lens for everything else that follows. You could think of them as the absolute non-negotiable rules of the game. First up, we have infinite, or in Chinese, 无限. This is a big one. It means boundless, totally without limits. But notice how specific the definition is. It's not just infinitely big. It says God is infinite in his very being, his wisdom, and his power. Each of those is fundamentally without any restriction. Next, we've got eternal, or 永恒, 永恒. And this is a really important distinction. This doesn't just mean living for a really, really long time. It means existing completely outside of time as we know it. No beginning, no end. A state of being that isn't measured by a clock. And the third absolute is unchangeable, or 不变. And honestly, this one might be the most mind-bending of all. It means that God's nature, his character, his truth, none of it ever changes. It doesn't evolve, it doesn't decay, it doesn't have good days and bad days. It's just perfectly, absolutely consistent. So when you put those three things together, infinite, eternal, and unchangeable, you get the central idea of this whole definition, what theologians call the creator-creature distinction. Just look at the comparison. Everything about us and our world is the exact opposite. We are finite, we are temporal, and boy, are we changeable. These three absolutes are meant to place God in a category all by himself. So let's just pause on that for a second. Really think about it. How is a power that is completely unchangeable different from human power? You know, our power can grow, it can fade, it can be used for good one day and not so good the next. It's a pretty big difference when you stop to think about it. Okay, so now that we have that lens, infinite, eternal, unchangeable, we can move on to the next part of the definition, the 7 perfections. But here's the key thing to remember. These are not 7 different parts of God. They are 7 qualities that all belong to one single, unified being. And what is that unified being? The definition tells us right at the start. God is a spirit. This is the foundational identity. It means God isn't made of matter, isn't limited to a physical body, or stuck in one place. This one spirit is the subject, and all the perfections that follow are its attributes. Now, these 7 perfections are usually broken down into 2 groups. The first group is what you could call the attributes of being. This covers his actual existence, or 存在, his wisdom, 智慧, and his power, 力量. Basically, these describe the very nature of what he is and what he can do. And the second group describes his moral character. This is where we find holiness, 圣洁, justice, 公义, goodness, 良善, and last but not least, truth, 真理. These 4 together define a perfect moral nature. Okay, here it comes. This is the crucial step where the whole definition clicks together. Remember those first 3 absolutes we talked about? Well, you have to apply them to every single one of these 7 perfections. So it's not just goodness, it's infinite, eternal, and unchangeable goodness. It's not just power, it's infinite, eternal, and unchangeable power. You see? That simple move changes everything. And this leads us to the next beautiful piece of logic in this definition, what's called the harmony of the attributes. Because all of these qualities belong to one unified spirit, and because they all share that same absolute nature, they can't possibly conflict with each other. They have to exist in perfect, seamless unity. This is a perfect example. I mean, think about it. Infinite power with anything less than infinite wisdom would be absolutely terrifying, right? It would be random and chaotic.
But this definition argues that God's power is always guided by his infinite wisdom. Power is never used without perfect knowledge and understanding.
The same thing happens with justice and goodness. In our world, justice can sometimes feel harsh or cold, and goodness can sometimes seem weak or unjust. But here, they are in perfect alignment. God's justice is never cruel because it's always an expression of infinite goodness. And his goodness is never permissive because it's an expression of infinite justice. It's a truly holy goodness.
And let's look at one more. God's eternal power, his ability to act throughout all of time, is always directed by his unchangeable holiness. What does that mean? It means his actions are always perfectly consistent with his moral purity. That power never, ever deviates from that perfect holiness. Let's stop and think about this one too. What are the real-world implications of this idea? Why is it so significant to imagine a being whose justice and goodness are never fighting each other? What does that mean for concepts like fairness or mercy or law?
So after peeling back all those layers, we finally get to the fundamental takeaway. The whole definition from start to finish has been carefully built to lead to one massive conclusion: the absolute and fundamental distinction between the creator and the creature. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical point. It's the very foundation of how this worldview understands everything, from worship to humility to our place in the universe. This table really sums it all up, doesn't it? We can be good, sure, but our goodness is finite and it changes. We can search for truth, but our understanding is temporary and often relative. We can gain some wisdom, but it will always be limited, and we can always be wrong. The argument here is that the divine nature has these qualities on an entirely different plane of existence: infinite, eternal, absolute, and perfect. So let's do a quick flyby of the logic we just walked through. It all starts with God as a single, unified spirit. The key to understanding that spirit is through those three absolutes: infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. Those absolutes then modify all seven perfections, which forces them into a state of perfect harmony. And the end result? That fundamental, unbridgeable distinction between the creator and creation. And that brings us to one last thought to leave you with. The definition claims that God is unchangeable in his truth. So what are the implications of that? What does it mean to ground the very concept of truth, not in a shifting human opinion or a cultural trend, but in a being who, by definition, cannot change? What could that possibly mean for how we understand reality itself? Thanks for joining me for this breakdown.